let's talk about the Canadians, that edition of the Pro Wrestling Hall of Fame. I was in Iowa that glorious day at the International Wrestling Hall of Fame.
It wasn't a Dan Gable Hall of Fame at that point. Tragos Thesz Professional Wrestling Hall of Fame is what we call it.
In Waterloo, Iowa. And I was
where
there.
Where the NWA was formed. Got a lot of history there. And Thunderbolt Patterson's from Waterloo, Iowa, too. So, there's a lot going for it.
Right. I believe Gotch even wrestled there a few times.
For sure.
Yes, I believe so. And I was sitting there at a banquet table. It's a small banquet. Back then they were small, and maybe 150, maybe 200 people tops, I would say. And up on the dais are many luminaries. There's Roddy Piper and Bret Hart. And we're just about getting ready for everything to get going here. There's an awards presentation and everything. And I was sitting next to a friend of mine from Milwaukee, really looking forward to this great evening. And early on in the ceremonies, Bret Hart stands up. What exactly did he say? You remember him verbatim? What did he say initially?
You're misremembering things, Carmine. I know that's a first, but
that's the reason why I'm having you on here.
Yeah, I know what you're trying to do, and that's all right. You warned me at least. The short version is that Steven Johnson and I had done our 3 different books. We'd done the Heels, Tag Teams, and the Canadians in the Pro Wrestling Hall of Fame series. And the Tragos Thesz Professional Wrestling Hall of Fame there, that's part of the greater International Wrestling Museum in Iowa, had presented us with the James C. Melby Award for Wrestling Journalism. And we got that in the afternoon. And that was a great, great moment for both of us. I actually remember when they called, I said, no, I don't think I should get an award, because I was 37, I think, at the time. And I called Steve Johnson, who's older than me. He goes, Greg, anytime you're 50 and they want to give you an award, you got to take it. So I got that award on his behalf, is the way I look at it. He wasn't quite 50 at that time. He was just about there. So we got our award in the afternoon. It was a good moment. We weren't getting our award at the banquet that night. However, that afternoon, we gave away some copies of the Pro Wrestling Hall of Fame, the Heels, including one to Bret Hart, who I wrote on the inside, your favorite heel is on page, whatever it was, 240, who's Archie the Stomper Gouldy, which was his favorite heel of all time, which he's written about many times and he said many times. So that all leads up to the evening when there were many awards being given out. This is during the award ceremony. We had our dinner and we were all sitting there and they'd started the awards, and he was accepting an award on behalf of his father, Stu Hart, who was being inducted into the Tragos Thesz Hall of Fame, which tries to recognize how amateur wrestling and professional wrestling can be made into a different kind of art form than the showy guys, like your Killer Kowalski's, as great a performer as he is, nobody would ever say he had a technical background, the way a Bret Hart did, the way a Kurt Hennig did for a couple of recent names, as well as, your Lou Theszes and your Danny Hodges and all those kind of names from the past. So Stu Hart was being honored and Bret was inducting him. And he talked about a life in pro wrestling and what it all meant. Then he segued into lambasting me, and yet not Steven Johnson. Steve Johnson was sitting there with his wife, and I was there with my father. My dad certainly didn't know what was going on. But Bret Hart said, Greg Oliver writes these books on wrestling. It's all made up. It's not the truth. It's just baloney. I wrote a book that took 7 years. I gave everything I had to write about some of the deepest tragedies, the truth about my life as a wrestler. For someone like this that sits there in this room with me to say that in his website that my truth is not the truth, it's just wrong for me to be in the same room as these people. They don't honor the truth of wrestling. So at some point when it's all happening here, Steve and his wife Cindy left. And I respect that. It's his decision. But I sat there. So later, the rest of it goes, I'm going to step aside now. And I just want to say it's not right for me to be in the same room as people who don't do honor and justice to my profession. You either have a choice of leaving or I will. So
That's
a little bit,
it. That was the moment.
Not transcribed. Okay, so then he goes, then it makes me laugh that Greg Oliver here rated me behind Skylo Low as I think the 13th greatest Canadian wrestler. I have news for him. He's wrong. Skylo Low was a much better wrestler than me, but he's only half the man that I was. So there, he took a cheap shot at Skylo Low. So you wanted the word charlatan. So when you write about wrestling, you talk about wrestling, especially when you're among these kind of people, you owe it to tell the truth. If you want to come here and be a charlatan, well, you're in the wrong place because this is a room filled with legends and people that paid their dues in wrestling. Take your sorry-ass lies about wrestling and how you made it up and save your books because they're not the truth. This room is filled with truth. Thank you. I'm talking to you, Greg Oliver. Either you go or I go. Do you remember what I did?
Go ahead.
You don't remember what I did?
Oh, you got up and waved.
Well, no, I sat there and waved, but I just sort of did a little queenly wave, nice and slow, bye. And so Bret goes, Greg Oliver's going to stay. I'm going to my room. And then he leaves the room. And there's honestly silence in the room.
It was so awesome. It was a magical moment, actually, to see him get up and walk out and you just sitting there just waving, just beaming ear to ear. It was incredible.
I was not beaming. Let's be realistic.
You sure?
I was freaked out.
You weren't smiling? I think you were smiling. Sure you were smiling.
I didn't know what the hell was going on. Nobody did. It was so bizarre. What are you going to do, right? The guy's had strokes. He's had all kinds of issues. I'm a forgiving person. I never had a problem with Bret Hart.
Right. You just rated him number 14, that's all.
Well, I remember talking to Gene Kiniski, and I said, Gene, I've got you ranked the 6th best Canadian wrestler of all time. And I don't know if you've ever met Gene over the years, but he's kind of a gruff guy. And he starts doing his kind of thing. I said, Gene, can I tell you who's ahead of you? So I did. Whipper Billy Watson, Yvon Robert, Killer Kowalski, Mad Dog of Fashawn, and Earl McCready. And Gene Kiniski, there's sort of just silence on the other end. He goes, I'm okay with that. So you have to respect the history. You have to respect how things happen. Would I rank them the same today? Maybe not. That's not really the point of all this. The point is that it was not the time and the place to do it. That's my biggest problem with it.
Today?
Well, for one, our rule was, and it always has been with these, is that if you were an active wrestler, you wouldn't get ranked in our top 20. So in a book on Canadians, does Edge make a top 20? Probably. I remember thinking Chris Benoit would probably be in there, but now, of course, Chris Benoit is not going to be any top 20. Jericho deserves mention, but he's not even done wrestling. So, yeah, it has to be a different book today than it would be back then, and that's just the nature of the business, right? It keeps evolving. It keeps changing. Bret was good in his time. If you tried to put Bret from 1994 in the ring today with these guys, he'd look strangely out of place.
Their rankings, though, are based upon their overall achievements in the business?
Everything. Their importance to Canadian wrestling, their amount of press they got, everything. Well, Whipper was our iconic figure, right? So Whipper Billy Watson was, like the Gorgeous George up here. And in fact, it shows the fundamental difference between Canada and the U.S. Our first major wrestling star was a goody-goody who had a Whipper Watson safety club for kids to stay safe. And then your first star was Gorgeous George, this primping prima donna who strutted around the ring. That's the fundamental difference between the Canada and the U.S. right there in pro wrestling.
There's a lot of other fundamental differences that we're not going to get into here today.
I respect that. Let's stick to what we need to stick to.
Oh, I kid. Okay, back to Bret Hart. You ranked him at number 14. Now, ranked at number 13 was his favorite wrestler, Stomper Gouldy.
Yeah, his dad was ahead of him, a Brody Piper, a Bill the Butcher.
John and Chris Hollis were 12. Now, why were John and Chris together in that? Were they because of their impact as a team in Canada?
Yeah, there's a lot of that I decided to do. Again, would I do it the same today? Probably not. But, also the Sharp brothers are in there. Ben and Mike Sharp are in there as a team. They're, I can't remember, 15. But the fact is that they were massive stars in Japan. They were the first real Gaijin tag team to make it big in Japan. So again, it's a timing thing. When you talk Skylar Low and Little Beaver, well, they wrestled for the Queen of England. She requested it. So, there's...
Sharp number 9. Number 9.
There you go. And again, they were the first major stars in Japan that were Gaijin. And they happened to be Canadian. They were living in San Francisco at the time, and that's how they got the gig. But it's a great story. Fascinating guys, too.
Skylar Low and Little Beaver, 8 and 8.5. That was cute.
Yeah, that was a gimmick. Yeah.
But those guys are fantastic. But they're in a category of their own as far as I'm concerned. My God. I mean, there will never be another midget wrestler. I don't see any great prospects for midget wrestling in the future. Not like those guys.
You're right. Well, and there'll never be a whole circuit where they can wrestle like it was back then with dozens. And the amount of travel they did and all that, it's like mad respect. We talk about the WWF lifestyle of the 1980s. Well, those midget wrestlers and those women wrestlers, they went so far. I mean, their cars just got totally worn down. So much driving. And all of them crammed in there. Again, the times change, right? Flying is exhausting too. But flying's exhausting in a different way than taking a car everywhere. And the baloney blowouts are exactly what they talked about, weren't they? Like, there was nowhere to get food. So you stopped, you got a pound of bologna and a loaf of bread and some mustard.
right.
Exactly.
That's right.
And that's what you had.
You just got me thinking about midget wrestling. We really have seen the death of midget wrestling. There is nobody like Little Brooke or Little Tokyo or Sky Lolo, Little Beaver. I mean, the art of midget wrestling has been completely lost. It's really because midgets, they wanted to work like your regular size guys on the show. They're doing the same spots that they're doing, and I don't know how that's supposed to get over. But
that's
those
sort
guys
of that
were
Mexican influence, isn't it, though? Like, that's what really happened in Mexico, and that translated into here.
Yes.
Like, they had the little representations, right? So you had the little, can't remember all the names offhand, but yeah, little mascarita, right?
Right.
And they were modeled on the bigger wrestlers, and that's how it progressed, and they were supposed to do the same moves as the big wrestlers, and that sort of got imported here.
Isn't that something? Let's talk about who else we have on the list. Well, of course, Roddy. You have to put Roddy there. Roddy, you put at number 7.
Look at the guys in front. You have to. Like, it's tough to get them in there, right? Roddy Piper was a key figure.
So just comparing the two, Bret Hart and Roddy Piper, why would Roddy be up 7 pegs on the totem pole higher than Bret?
Well, I don't know. Would I do it the same like today? I don't know. But the fact is that Roddy Piper certainly had more of a name within the general population than Bret Hart ever did.
Yeah.
Despite what Bret Hart may ever think. He does think he's the greatest thing. You know, his whole idea of Survivor Series, I can't lose in Canada and stuff. I'm not sure you could have found, you know, you walk down the streets of Montreal that anybody would have cared, other than those 20,000 people that were in the stand.
Bret has a photo of himself in every room of his house, I understand.
I did not get the full tour when I was there in '97.
Is that right? You